The city was a beast of steel and glass, its cold breath a visible plume in the biting Christmas Eve air. For Leo, every gust of wind felt personal, a sharp reminder of the threadbare nature of his coat and the even thinner lining of his pockets. He held his daughter Lily's small, mittened hand, her warmth a tiny, precious anchor in the swirling chaos of last-minute shoppers. Lily, at 7 years old, possessed a quiet wisdom that often unsettled him. Her eyes, the same deep chocolate as her mother's, didn't just see the glittering store displays, they saw the cracks in the pavement, the tired faces on the bus, the stories that unfolded in the city's margins. Leo was a construction worker, a man who built things with his hands, yet he felt as though his own life was slowly being dismantled. The grief from his wife's passing 3 years prior was a constant, heavy presence, a phantom limb that ached with every happy family he saw. This Christmas, like the last, would be lean. A small, slightly crooked tree stood in their tiny apartment, decorated with homemade paper stars. The single present hidden in his closet was a small, second-hand book of fairy tales. His heart clenched at the thought of it. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough to fill the void his wife had left. As they turned a corner, away from the main thoroughfare of festive opulence, the sounds of the city shifted. The cheerful carols were replaced by the lonely hum of a street lamp and the distant wail of a siren. And it was there, in the harsh, yellow glow, that they saw the scene that would alter the very architecture of their lives. A man, cocooned in a cashmere coat that probably cost more than Leo's rent for an entire year, stood over a figure huddled on a frost-covered bench. The figure was an old woman, wrapped in layers of what looked like newspaper and thin, tattered blankets. Her face, etched with the deep lines of a long and difficult life, was turned away from the man, as if she could make herself invisible through sheer will. The man, whose name was Marcus, let out a laugh that was sharp and cruel, a shard of glass in the cold air. He said, "Look at you. A pathetic old relic. Why don't you do the world a favor and just freeze solid? It would be a more dignified end." His voice dripped with a casual, horrifying disdain. He reached into his pocket, not with compassion, but with theatrical contempt. He pulled out a single, crumpled dollar bill, held it between his polished fingers as if it were contaminated, and then let it flutter to the grimy snow at the woman's feet. "Here," he sneered, "buy yourself a clue. The world has no place for the useless." He turned, his expensive shoes crunching on the salted pavement, a smirk playing on his lips as he headed toward a gleaming black car parked at the curb. Leo froze, his hand tightening on Lily's. He felt a hot surge of rage, a righteous anger so potent it burned away the cold. But a deeper, colder feeling followed it, helplessness. What could he do? He was a nobody, a man struggling to keep his own head above water. To interfere was to invite trouble, to risk a confrontation he couldn't afford. But then he looked down at Lily. Her face was a mask of heartbreak, her lower lip trembling. Her wide, innocent eyes were fixed on the old woman, and in them, Leo saw a reflection of his own shame. What kind of a father would he be if he taught his daughter to walk away, to let cruelty win, to pretend she hadn't seen? Before we continue, please tell us where in the world are you tuning in from? Let us know in the comments below. The battle inside Leo lasted only a moment, but it felt like an eternity. The voice of his late wife echoed in his memory, a gentle but firm whisper, "Kindness costs nothing, Leo. But not being kind costs you everything." In that instant, the choice was made. It wasn't a choice, really. It was a necessity. He squeezed Lily's hand gently and whispered, "Stay right here for a second, sweetheart." He walked forward, his worn work boots making soft thuds in the snow. He positioned himself directly in Marcus's path, a solid, unmoving wall of denim and quiet fury. Marcus stopped, an expression of irritated surprise flashing across his handsome, smug face. He looked Leo up and down, his eyes lingering on the frayed cuffs of his jacket and the paint splatters on his jeans. He asked, with a condescending drawl, "Can I help you? Or are you looking for a handout too?" Leo's voice, when it came, was low and steady, a rumble of controlled power. You dropped this, he said, not moving. He gestured with his chin toward the crumpled bill near the old woman's feet. Marcus scoffed, a puff of white air escaping his lips. I didn't drop it. I threw it away. Just like the rest of the trash on this street. The words were meant to wound, to diminish him, but they had the opposite effect. They solidified Leo's resolve. A person is not trash, Leo stated, the words simple, but carrying the weight of a profound truth. You should pick it up. And then you should apologize. For a moment, Marcus looked genuinely baffled, as if the concept of apologizing to someone he deemed inferior was a foreign language. Then, his bafflement curdled into rage. Who in the hell do you think you are? He snarled, stepping closer, trying to use his height and obvious wealth as a form of intimidation. You're a dime a dozen construction grunt telling me what to do. Get out of my way before I have you arrested for harassment. But Leo didn't flinch. He had faced down scaffolding in high winds and operated heavy machinery in treacherous conditions. A man in a fancy coat held no terror for him. He simply looked Marcus in the eye and said, no. The single word hung in the air, absolute and unbreakable. Marcus, unaccustomed to being denied anything, was momentarily speechless. He sputtered, his face turning a blotchy red. He looked from Leo's determined face to the waiting chauffeur in his car, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. Humiliating a defenseless old woman was one thing, a physical confrontation with a man who looked like he could snap him in two was another. With a final, venomous glare, he spat on the ground near Leo's feet. You'll regret this, you pathetic loser, he hissed, before storming past him and climbing into the warmth of his luxury sedan. The car purred to life and sped away, leaving a cloud of exhaust in its wake. The confrontation was over. The silence that descended felt heavy, charged with the lingering ugliness of the encounter. Leo let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. His hands were trembling, not from cold, but from adrenaline. He turned back to the bench. The old woman, Alara, had finally looked up. Her eyes, a startlingly clear and intelligent blue, were fixed on him. They held no pity, only a deep, searching curiosity. Lily ran to his side and tugged on his sleeve. Daddy, is she okay? She asked, her voice small and worried. Leo walked over to the bench and crouched down, bringing himself to the woman's level. Ma'am, he began softly, are you all right? She didn't answer immediately. She simply studied his face, her gaze so intense it felt as if she were looking directly into his soul, weighing the contents. Then, a small, sad smile touched her lips. She said, her voice raspy from the cold, it's been a long time since anyone has stood up for me. Her words were a quiet blow to Leo's heart. He looked at his own thin jacket, then at her, shivering violently under her makeshift coverings. An impulse, pure and undeniable, took hold of him. He began to shrug off his jacket. You're freezing, he said. Please, take this. The old woman, Alara, raised a frail, gloved hand to stop him. Her gloves were worn through at the fingertips, revealing skin that was red and chapped. No, young man, she insisted, her voice gaining a sliver of strength. You need it more than I do. You have a little one to think of. Her gaze softened as it fell on Lily, who was watching them with wide, concerned eyes. But Leo was resolute. The image of Marcus's sneering face was burned into his mind. He couldn't erase that cruelty, but he could counter it with his own kindness. It felt like a moral imperative, a way of rebalancing the scales of the universe, if only on this one small, forgotten street corner. I'll be fine, he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. He slipped the jacket off his shoulders and gently draped it over her, tucking it in around her thin frame. The jacket was worn and smelled faintly of sawdust and hard work, but it was warm from his body, and it was an offering. It was an act of defiance against the coldness of the world. As he did, he felt Lily move beside him. Without a word, his daughter, his beautiful, compassionate daughter, pulled off her own small, colorful mittens and held them out to the woman. Here, Lily said, her voice clear as a bell. Your hands look cold. Ilara looked from the offered mittens to Lily's small, bare hands, and for the first time, her carefully composed expression crumpled. A single tear traced a path down her weathered cheek, freezing almost instantly in the frigid air. She slowly took the mittens, her trembling fingers brushing against Lily's. "Thank you, little one," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You have a very good heart." Leo's own eyes stung. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the crumpled $10 bill he had been saving. It was supposed to be for a small, hot Christmas dinner for him and Lily, a tiny luxury in a month of scrimping. Without a second thought, he pressed it into Ilara's hand. "Please," he said. "Get yourself a hot meal. Something warm." He then noticed a small coffee cart at the end of the block, its steam rising like a hopeful prayer in the twilight. He used the last of the change in his pocket to buy a large, steaming cup of coffee and brought it back to her, wrapping her cold hands around the warm cardboard. She took a sip, closing her eyes as the warmth spread through her. "You are a good man," she said, looking at him over the rim of the cup. Her blue eyes seemed to see everything, his grief, his struggle, his quiet integrity. The compliment landed with more force than any paycheck he had ever received. But as he looked at her, huddled alone on the bench as the city twinkled with a joy that felt a million miles away, he knew it wasn't enough. The coat, the money, the coffee, they were temporary fixes. The night was growing colder, the wind more relentless. Leaving her here felt wrong. It felt like leaving a job half finished. He looked at Lily, then back at Ilara. An idea, reckless and impractical, formed in his mind. Their apartment was tiny. Their pantry was nearly bare. They had almost nothing to offer. But they had warmth. They had shelter. They had a spoonful of soup to share. "Ma'am," he said, the words feeling clumsy and inadequate. "I know this is forward, and you don't know us. But it's Christmas Eve. No one should be alone. We don't have much, but would you come and have dinner with us?" Ilara stared at him, her expression unreadable. The offer hung in the frigid air between them, a fragile, impossible bridge. She looked from Leo's earnest, worried face to Lily's hopeful one. For a long moment, she was silent, and Leo felt a flush of embarrassment. He had overstepped. He had presumed too much. Of course, a stranger wouldn't go home with another stranger, no matter the circumstances. "I'm sorry," he started to stammer. "I didn't mean to," but she cut him off, her voice quiet but firm. "I would be honored," she said. Relief washed over Leo, so potent it almost made him dizzy. He helped her to her feet. She was frail, leaning on him for support, but there was a resilience in her stance, a core of steel beneath the fragile exterior. The walk to their apartment was slow. Ilara said little, but her sharp eyes took in everything, the festive lights now seeming a little less mocking, the way Leo pointed out different constellations to Lily, the easy, loving rhythm of their conversation. Their building was old and a little run down, the paint peeling in the hallway. Leo felt a familiar pang of shame, wishing he could offer this kind stranger something better, something worthy of her quiet dignity. He unlocked the door to their small, one-bedroom apartment and ushered her inside. The air was warm, at least. The tiny, crooked tree in the corner, with its handmade stars, seemed to welcome her. Lily immediately took Ilara by the hand, her earlier shyness forgotten. "This is our castle," she announced proudly. Ilara smiled, a genuine, warm smile that transformed her face, smoothing away some of the lines of hardship. "It's a beautiful castle," she said, her eyes twinkling as she looked at a crayon drawing of a smiling sun taped to the wall. While Lily showed Ilara her small collection of treasures, a smooth river stone, a bird's feather, the fairy tale book her father had given her for her birthday, Leo went to the kitchen. The kitchen was little more than a corner of the main room, with a hot plate and a small fridge. He looked at his options, a can of tomato soup, a half loaf of bread, and a small wedge of cheese. It was a pauper's feast. His heart sank. This was all he had to offer. He felt the sting of his poverty more acutely in that moment than he had all year. But then he remembered the look in Alara's eyes on that cold bench. She wasn't looking for a feast. She was looking for warmth. She was looking for connection. He set to work, heating the soup, toasting the bread, and arranging the cheese on a plate with the care of a master chef. When he brought the simple meal to their small, wobbly table, Alara was sitting on the sofa, listening intently as Lily told her a long, rambling story about a squirrel in the park. The sight of them together, this old woman who had been discarded by the world and this little girl who saw the magic in everything, filled the small room with a light that no fancy Christmas decorations could ever replicate. They sat down to eat. Leo said a short, simple grace, thanking them for the food and for the company of a new friend. As they ate the soup, a comfortable silence settled over them. It wasn't awkward, it was peaceful. It was the silence of three lonely souls who had, for a brief moment, found a harbor in one another. The simple, hot soup tasted like the most delicious meal Leo had ever eaten. After dinner, as the wind howled outside, a new intimacy bloomed in the warmth of the apartment. It was Alara who broke the silence, her gaze on a small, framed photo on the windowsill. It was a picture of Leo and a smiling, vibrant woman, with a baby Lily in her arms. "Your wife?" Alara asked gently. "She is very beautiful." Leo picked up the photograph, his thumb instinctively stroking the glass over his wife's face. The grief, usually a roaring monster he kept locked away, was a quiet, aching presence tonight. In the gentle company of this stranger, he felt the lock on its cage begin to loosen. "Her name was Clara," he said, his voice a little rough. She was the light of my life. She could find the beauty in anything." A crack in the sidewalk, a wilting flower, she saw the world differently. He found himself talking, the words spilling out of him, a torrent of memory and pain he hadn't allowed himself to express in years. He spoke of their dreams, of the life they had planned to build together. He confessed how he had been on the cusp of a promising career as an architect, his mind buzzing with designs for soaring, light-filled buildings. But when Clara had died, suddenly and senselessly, from an aneurysm, the light had gone out of his world. "It felt like all the color just drained away," he whispered, staring at the photo. The blueprints, the models, they were just lines on a page. There was no joy in it anymore. No purpose. All I could see was Lily. I knew I had to provide for her, keep a roof over her head. So I took any job I could get. Laying bricks, hauling debris, it's honest work. But the man who dreamed of building cathedrals, he died with her. He finally looked up, his eyes blurry with unshed tears, half expecting to see pity or discomfort in Alara's face. Instead, he saw only a profound and unwavering understanding. She didn't offer empty platitudes like "she's in a better place" or "time heals all wounds." She simply sat there, a vessel for his grief, her quiet presence a testament to his pain. She reached across the small table and laid her hand over his. Her skin was still cold, but her touch was firm and grounding. "Grief is not a hole to be filled," she said, her voice soft but sure. "It is a landscape to be navigated. And it is a sign of a love that was vast and deep. You have honored her memory by raising such a wonderful, compassionate daughter." Her words were a balm on a wound he hadn't realized was still so raw. He felt seen. Not as a struggling construction worker, not as a pitiable widower, but as a man who had loved deeply and was trying his best to carry on. It was a gift, more precious than any amount of money. The simple act of being witnessed, of having his story heard without judgment, felt like a window had been opened in a room that had been sealed shut for 3 long years. A sliver of fresh air, of possibility, filtered in. Lily, who had been listening quietly, seemed to sense the shift in the room's emotional climate. She crawled onto the sofa and curled up next to Alara, laying her head on the old woman's lap. "Do you have any little girls, Alara?" she asked, her voice sleepy. Alara's hand went to Lily's hair, stroking it gently. A shadow passed over her features, a deep and ancient sadness. "I had a son once," she said, her voice a distant echo. A long, long time ago. He and his father, they went on a sailing trip. There was a storm. She didn't need to say any more. The 3 words, "there was a storm," contained an ocean of loss. Leo's heart ached for her. He now understood the source of the profound loneliness he had sensed in her. "I'm so sorry," he said, the words feeling utterly inadequate. Elara gave a small, weary nod, her eyes fixed on some distant point in the past. After they were gone, she continued, her voice gaining a harder, more brittle edge, "All I had left was the business my husband had built. I poured everything I had into it. My grief, my anger, my ambition. I built an empire. I thought if I built it high enough, it would protect me from feeling anything." She looked around the small, humble apartment, at the hand-drawn pictures on the wall, at the crooked little tree. A faint, sad smile played on her lips. "I have a house with 50 rooms, but it is empty. I have a staff of dozens, but I am utterly alone. The people I am surrounded by, they don't see me. They see a balance sheet, a signature on a check, a symbol of power. They tell me what they think I want to hear. Their kindness is a currency they use to try and buy my favor." Her gaze met Leo's, and the connection between them was electric. They were 2 sides of the same coin, he, who had so little materially but was rich in love, and she, who had everything but was starving for genuine connection. "Tonight," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "when you spoke to that man, when your little girl gave me her mittens, it was the first time in decades I have felt seen. Not as a problem to be ignored or a wallet to be opened, but as a person." She looked down at Lily, now fast asleep on her lap, a picture of perfect trust. "This is the first real Christmas I have had since I lost my family. You have given me a gift that all my fortune could never buy." The weight of her confession settled in the room, filling the space with a sense of profound significance. Leo realized that their chance encounter on the street was not just about him helping her, it was about them helping each other. He had given her warmth and safety, and she, in turn, had given him a space to finally voice his grief. They were 2 broken pieces from entirely different worlds, somehow fitting together to create a moment of wholeness. The night wore on. They talked for a little while longer, in hushed tones so as not to wake Lily. Elara asked Leo about his architectural drawings, her questions sharp and intelligent. He found himself, for the first time in years, speaking with passion about materials, and light, and the way a building can shape human experience. She listened, truly listened, and in her listening, she rekindled a spark within him he thought had long been extinguished. Eventually, exhaustion claimed them all. Leo carried a sleeping Lily to her small bed and tucked her in. He made a makeshift bed for Elara on the sofa with his only spare blankets. "It's not much," he apologized. She simply smiled and said, "It is more than enough." As Leo lay in his own bed, listening to the sound of the wind outside and the soft, even breathing of his daughter in the next room, a strange sense of peace settled over him. For the first time since Clara's death, the gnawing emptiness in his chest felt a little less vast. The future was still uncertain, and tomorrow he would still be a man struggling to make ends meet. But tonight, in his tiny, love-filled apartment, he had found something he hadn't even known he was looking for, a sliver of hope. When he awoke the next morning, the first thing he noticed was the silence. The apartment was filled with the pale, gentle light of Christmas morning, but the sofa was empty. For a heart-stopping moment, he felt a pang of disappointment, a fear that it had all been a dream, a strange and wonderful hallucination brought on by cold and loneliness. But then he saw it. On the small coffee table, where their simple soup bowls had sat just hours before, were 2 items. The first was a small, exquisitely carved wooden bird, its wings outstretched as if in mid-flight. It was resting beside a note with Lily's name on it. The second was a crisp, white envelope with his own name, Leo, written in a surprisingly elegant, firm script. He picked up the bird. It was smooth and warm to the touch, crafted with incredible skill. He knew Lily would treasure it. Then, with a sense of trepidation, he opened his own envelope. Inside was not money, as he might have half expected, but a single sheet of thick, expensive-feeling paper. The note was brief, its message both cryptic and commanding. It read, "Thank you for showing me the light when all I saw was darkness. Your kindness will be returned 1,000-fold. An appointment has been made for you. Be at this address tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. sharp. Don't be late." Below the message was an address. Leo's breath caught in his throat. He knew the address. Every architect in the city knew that address. It was the headquarters of Sterling Thorne Enterprises, the most prestigious, innovative, and notoriously ruthless architectural firm in the country. It was a glass and steel monolith that scraped the sky, a symbol of unimaginable success and power. What in the world could this mean? Was it a joke? A cruel prank? His mind raced, trying to connect the dots between the freezing, destitute woman on the bench and the city's most powerful corporation. It made no sense. He looked at the note again, at the strong, confident handwriting. There was an authority to it that was undeniable. He spent the rest of Christmas Day in a fog of confusion and cautious hope. He and Lily played with her new wooden bird, which she named Hope. They ate the leftover soup and bread. It was a quiet day, but the apartment felt different. The air was charged with a new energy, the tingling feeling of a story that was not yet over. That night, Leo could barely sleep. He tossed and turned, the address on the note burned into his mind. What should he do? Should he go? It seemed absurd. He imagined himself walking into that opulent lobby, a construction worker in his best, but still worn, clothes, claiming to have an appointment. He would be laughed out of the building. But what if he didn't go? What if this was, by some miracle, a real opportunity, the 1 in a billion chance to reclaim the life he had lost? The thought of staying stuck, of a future filled with nothing but more back-breaking labor and the constant struggle to stay afloat, was even more terrifying than the thought of potential humiliation. By dawn, he had made his decision. He had to know. He had to see the story through to its end. The next morning, he dressed in his cleanest jeans and a pressed, but faded, button-down shirt. He looked at his reflection in the cracked bathroom mirror. He saw a tired man with calloused hands and a haunted look in his eyes. He didn't look like someone who belonged at Sterling Thorne Enterprises. He almost lost his nerve then and there. But then he thought of Lily, and he thought of Alara's words, "You are a good man." He took a deep breath, straightened his shoulders, and walked out the door. The lobby of the Sterling Thorne building was even more intimidating than he had imagined. It was a cavernous space of polished marble and gleaming chrome, vast and silent as a cathedral dedicated to the god of money. A chic, severe-looking receptionist sat behind a desk that was larger than Leo's entire kitchen. She eyed him with open disdain as he approached. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone implying he had clearly wandered into the wrong place. "Yes," Leo said, his voice sounding small in the vast space. "I have an appointment. For 9 o'clock. My name is Leo Vance." The receptionist typed his name into her computer, a small, bored frown on her face. "I don't see any appointment for a Leo Vance," she said dismissively, already turning her attention back to her screen. "Perhaps you have the wrong day. Or the wrong building." Just as the familiar, cold shame began to creep over him, a voice cut through the air, sharp and commanding. "He's with me." Leo turned. A man in a perfectly tailored, charcoal gray suit was striding toward them. He had a stern face and an air of absolute authority. The receptionist immediately straightened up, her disdain replaced by nervous deference. "Mr. Harrison, my apologies," she stammered. The man, Mr. Harrison, ignored her completely. His focus was entirely on Leo. He gave him a swift, assessing look, his eyes missing nothing, from his worn boots to the hopefully yet terrified expression on his face. "Mr. Vance," he said, his voice formal but not unkind. "Right on time. Please, follow me." Leo, completely bewildered, could do nothing but follow. Mr. Harrison led him past security gates that opened with a silent swoosh, and into a private, high-speed elevator. The ride up was silent and vertiginous. Leo's ears popped as they ascended dozens of floors in a matter of seconds. The elevator doors opened directly into a hallway carpeted in plush, dark wool. At the end of the hall were two massive wooden doors. Mr. Harrison paused before them and turned to Leo. "She is waiting for you," he said, his expression giving nothing away. He opened one of the doors and gestured for Leo to enter. Leo's heart was pounding against his ribs like a trapped bird. He stepped across the threshold and into the most magnificent room he had ever seen. It was a boardroom, dominated by a colossal mahogany table that shone like dark water. One entire wall was a floor-to-ceiling window, offering a breathtaking, godlike view of the entire city spread out below. Seated around the table were a dozen men and women in power suits, their faces a mixture of curiosity and tension. At the far end of the room, looking pale and utterly terrified, was a face Leo recognized with a jolt: Marcus, the man from Christmas Eve. And then, Leo's eyes found the head of the table. And the world stopped. Sitting there, not in tattered rags, but in an elegant, navy blue suit that spoke of quiet, immense power, was Alara. Her white hair was styled impeccably. A simple string of pearls graced her neck. She was no longer a frail, freezing old woman. She was a queen on her throne. The same intelligent blue eyes that had looked at him with such gratitude on that cold bench were now fixed on him, but now they held an additional glint, the unmistakable glint of command. She smiled, a small, knowing smile that was both warm and incredibly powerful. "Leo," she said, her voice clear and strong, resonating through the silent room. "Thank you for coming. Please, have a seat." One of the board members gestured to an empty chair directly opposite Marcus. As Leo walked toward it, his legs feeling like they were made of lead, the pieces of the puzzle began to slam into place with dizzying speed. Ilara. The elegant handwriting. Sterling Thorn Enterprises. He sank into the plush leather chair, his mind reeling. Ilara let the silence stretch for a moment, allowing the full, shocking weight of the situation to settle on everyone in the room. Then, she began to speak. "I would like to introduce you all to Mr. Leo Vance," she said, her voice calm and measured. "2 nights ago, on Christmas Eve, Mr. Vance gave me his coat, his last $10, and a place in his home. He and his daughter showed me a kindness and an integrity I had long feared no longer existed in this world." She then turned her gaze, which had suddenly become as cold and hard as diamond, upon Marcus. "At the same time, my nephew, Marcus Thorne, a man who stands to inherit a significant portion of this company, also encountered me. He, however, chose to mock me, to insult me, and to throw a single dollar at my feet like I was less than human." A gasp rippled through the room. Marcus, who had been staring at the table, flinched as if he had been physically struck. His face was ashen, his earlier arrogance completely stripped away, leaving only a raw, pathetic fear. The transformation was absolute. The bully had become the victim. Ilara continued, her voice unwavering. "For years, I have performed a test. Once a year, I leave this tower and I walk among the people of this city not as a CEO, but as one of the forgotten. I do it to remember where I came from. But more importantly, I do it to see the true character of the people around me, especially those who hold, or wish to hold, power within my organization." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. This year's test was particularly illuminating. She pressed a button on a console in front of her. A large screen descended from the ceiling, and with a soft whir, it came to life. The entire room was forced to watch the grainy, but perfectly clear, security footage from the street corner on Christmas Eve. They saw Marcus, in his expensive coat, sneering and cruel. They heard his vicious words, amplified in the silent, horrified boardroom. They saw him toss the crumpled bill. And then they saw Leo step forward. They saw his quiet defiance, his simple, powerful act of shielding a vulnerable stranger. They saw him drape his own jacket over Ilara's shoulders. They saw little Lily offer up her mittens. The contrast was brutal, a stark, undeniable portrait of good versus evil, of compassion versus cruelty. When the video ended, the screen retracted, and the silence in the room was deafening. Every eye was on Marcus, who looked as though he wanted the marble floor to swallow him whole. He was trembling, a sheen of cold sweat on his forehead. "Marcus," Alara said, her voice dropping to a low, dangerous level. "Did you have anything you wanted to say?" He looked up, his eyes pleading. "Aunt Alara," he whimpered, his voice cracking. I didn't know it was you. I am so sorry. It was a mistake, a terrible mistake." Alara's expression was one of profound, glacial disappointment. "No, Marcus," she said, cutting him off. "That is where you are wrong. Your mistake was not in failing to recognize me. Your mistake was in your actions. You didn't know it was me, and so you showed your true self. A self that is cruel, heartless, and rotten to the core. A man who derives pleasure from the suffering of others is not a man at all. He is a monster." She stood up, her small frame radiating an immense power that filled the entire room. "This company, Sterling Thorne, was built by my husband and me on a foundation of integrity, hard work, and a commitment to building a better world. You have shown me that you do not possess a single one of those values. You have shown me that you care for nothing but yourself." Her next words were delivered like a judge passing a final sentence. "Effective immediately, you are removed from the board of this company. You are terminated from your position. And as of this moment, you are formally and irrevocably disinherited. You will not receive another penny from me or this estate. Security will escort you from the building. I believe you know the way to the street." Marcus's face, which had been pale with fear, now turned a ghastly shade of white. The reality of his ruin crashed down upon him. He was no longer the smug, untouchable heir. He was nothing. The poetic justice was swift and absolute. His cruelty had not just been exposed, it had cost him everything. He opened his mouth to protest, to beg, but no sound came out. He was paralyzed, frozen by the magnitude of his downfall. Two stern-faced security guards entered the room, took him by each arm, and led him away, his expensive suit now looking like a costume on a broken man. The heavy doors closed behind him, and it was over. The tension in the boardroom dissipated, replaced by a stunned silence. Alara Sterling remained standing for a moment, her gaze following the door through which her nephew had just been unceremoniously evicted from his own life. Then, she turned her attention back to the room, and specifically, to Leo. Her expression softened, the icy resolve melting away to reveal the warmth he remembered from Christmas Eve. "Leo," she said, and her voice was now filled with a genuine, deep respect. "Please, stand up." Leo, still reeling from the dramatic spectacle, slowly rose to his feet. He felt like a man in a dream, an unwilling actor in a play far grander than he could have ever imagined. The board members were all looking at him now, their expressions a mixture of awe and intense curiosity. This was the man who had passed the unpassable test. This was the man who had won the favor of the formidable Alara Sterling. "I had my team look into you last night," Alara continued, her voice gentle. "I hope you'll forgive the intrusion, but I had to know more about the man who showed such decency." She picked up a file from the table. "I know about your degree in architecture from Cornell. I know you graduated top of your class. I've seen the portfolio of your student work. Your designs for public spaces were brilliant, filled with light and humanity. And I know about your wife, Clara. I know that when you lost her, you lost your way. You put your dreams aside to raise your daughter." Leo swallowed hard, his throat tight with emotion. To hear his own life, his own private tragedy and sacrifice, laid bare in this room of strangers was overwhelming. But there was no pity in Alara's voice, only acknowledgement. "Leo," she said, her blue eyes locking with his. "This company has enough men like Marcus. It has enough people who can calculate profit margins and navigate loopholes. What it doesn't have enough of, what the world doesn't have enough of is heart. It needs a soul. It needs someone who understands that the foundation of any great structure isn't concrete or steel, but compassion for the people who will use it. She walked around the table until she was standing directly in front of him. I am not just offering you a job, Leo. I am offering you a chance to reclaim your dream. I am creating a new division within Sterling Thorne, a division focused on philanthropic and community-based projects. We will design and build beautiful, sustainable, and affordable housing for those in need. We will create parks and libraries and community centers in underserved neighborhoods. I want you to be its head architect. Leo stared at her, speechless. It was too much to comprehend. Head architect? His own division? Building things that mattered? It was the very dream he had been forced to bury 3 years ago, now being offered back to him on a silver platter. I don't know what to say, he stammered, his mind a whirlwind of shock and disbelief. I'm a construction worker. I haven't designed anything in years. Ilara smiled, a wise, knowing smile. You haven't stopped being an architect, Leo. You just stopped drawing. The vision is still inside you. I saw it when you talked about light and space in your little apartment. I see it in your eyes right now. We will give you all the resources you need, a full team, and a salary that will ensure that you and Lily will never have to worry about a cold night or a lean meal ever again. All I ask is that you bring your heart to your work. Will you do that for me, Leo? Will you help me build a better world? The question hung in the air, a life-altering proposition. It was a second chance. It was redemption. It was the light at the end of a very long, very dark tunnel. He thought of Lily. He thought of Clara. He thought of the heavy weight of grief he had carried for so long. And for the first time, he felt it begin to lift. Tears welled in his eyes, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of overwhelming, impossible gratitude. Yes, he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. Yes, I will. And so began a new chapter, one more beautiful than any fairy tale Leo could have read to his daughter. The transition was a whirlwind. Ilara was true to her word, and then some. She provided Leo and Lily with a beautiful, spacious apartment in a warm, family-friendly building, not far from a lovely park. The first time Lily saw her own room, painted a cheerful yellow and filled with new toys and a canopy bed, her gasp of delight was a sound Leo would treasure for the rest of his life. For Ilara, the discovery of Leo and Lily was like finding a spring in a barren desert. She shed the shell of the formidable CEO when she was with them, becoming simply Ilara, a doting, surrogate grandmother. She taught Lily how to bake cookies in their new, sun-drenched kitchen and took her to museums and concerts. She filled the void of the grandmother Lily had never known, and in return, Lily's unconditional love and laughter filled the vast, lonely spaces in Ilara's own heart. Leo, meanwhile, threw himself into his new role with a passion he thought he had lost forever. The rust fell away quickly, and the brilliant architect within him reawakened, stronger and more purposeful than before. He was no longer designing sterile office buildings for corporate clients, he was designing homes for families who had lost theirs, community centers that would become the heart of a neighborhood, and parks where children like Lily could play safely. His past struggles had given him a unique and powerful perspective. He understood the importance of dignity, of light, of a space that felt like a home, not just a shelter. His designs were lauded not just for their beauty, but for their humanity. He was healing himself by healing the community around him. The three of them, Leo, the single father who had rediscovered his purpose, Lily, the little girl who was the moral compass for them all, and Ilara, the lonely queen who had found her family, became an inseparable unit. They spent weekends together, had dinner several times a week, and celebrated holidays not as three separate people, but as one, singular family, forged not by blood, but by a single act of kindness on a cold Christmas Eve. One sunny afternoon, about a year later, Leo stood on a construction site, a blueprint in his hand. It was the site of the first affordable housing complex he had designed. He watched as families, who had been on waiting lists for years, walked through the nearly completed building, their faces filled with awe and hope. Ilara and Lily stood beside him. Lily slipped her small hand into his. "You built this, Daddy," she said, her voice filled with pride. "It's beautiful." Ilara put her arm around Leo's shoulders. "You did more than build a building, Leo," she said softly. "You built a future." Leo looked from the building to his daughter, to the woman who had become his mentor and his family. He thought of the man he had been, drowning in grief, and the man he was now, filled with purpose and love. He realized that the greatest structure he had ever built was not made of steel or glass, but of the broken pieces of their lives, reassembled by compassion into something strong, beautiful, and whole. What a powerful and moving story this is. Doesn't it just go to show that the universe has a way of rewarding true, selfless kindness? Leo was a man with almost nothing, but he was willing to give his last dollar, his own coat, to a stranger in need. He didn't do it for a reward. He did it because it was the right thing to do. And look at what happened. His one small act of decency created a ripple effect that not only saved him from a life of struggle but also brought down a cruel and arrogant man, and created a beautiful new family. This story teaches us such a vital lesson. True wealth isn't measured by the number in your bank account, but by the amount of love and compassion in your heart. Marcus had all the money in the world, but he was spiritually bankrupt, and in the end, he lost everything. Leo had nothing, but his richness of character brought him a life beyond his wildest dreams. It reminds us to never judge a book by its cover. The poor, freezing old woman on the bench was actually a powerful queen in disguise, searching for a heart of gold. We should treat every single person we meet with dignity and respect, not because of what they might do for us, but because of who we are. Have you ever witnessed an act of kindness that changed everything? Or have you ever been the recipient of unexpected help when you needed it most? Please share your own stories in the comments below. We would love to read them and be inspired by them. If this story touched your heart and lifted your soul, please give this video a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to Soul Lift Stories for more inspirational content. And please, share this video with your friends and family, with anyone who might need a reminder that goodness still exists in the world, and that one person, one choice, one act of kindness, can truly make all the difference. Thank you for watching, and remember, be the light in someone else's darkness. You never know whose life you might change.